so I'm already missing a couple minutes. So
Oh gosh.
I know, it's horrible, so I will do this very quickly. So this is Diane Collin. She is a Senior Community Initiatives Coordinator for Public Health Pediatrics section at Texas Children's Hospital. She earned her undergraduate degree in Family Studies and a master's degree in Early Childhood Education. She's worked as a certified child life specialist for over 20 years. She has particular experience around working with children who have been impacted by trauma due to illness and hospitalization. In her work, she was able to bring significant changes to the medical setting for children with autism, as well as creating dynamic, philanthropic, and volunteer programs. She has a particular interest in supporting parents through educational and behavioral challenges, early learning environments, supporting children in foster care, and suicide prevention. So please help me welcome. Go ahead.
No.
I figured she was going to do it.
That sounds like so long, I forget that's what my bio online says. So, yes, my name is Diane Collin. I am here today primarily from this man right here. My husband and I adopted our son, who is now 15. He's been in our home 2.5 years. And Chris was his CASA worker. So he spent many, way too many years in the foster care system. So, and thank you guys all for having me here today. I think I talked to, I don't know if you guys heard me, who all heard me talk before at the CASA conference, maybe just a few of you. Okay. So thank you for having me back. Some of the information is repeated, but I try to change it up a little bit to this. This is kind of just really more in general working with children from traumatic backgrounds. Here is some, I'm gonna just set these out here for you guys. As far as, if you guys come in and you want some handouts. The handouts are just a slide, nothing fancy. Really, what I want to talk about today is supporting children from trauma and trauma backgrounds. Some of the different aspects. I'm going to be really transparent as my experiences as a foster adoptive mother. It's not been an easy road. It's, I work with children in trauma for 20 years, and I'm going to be honest with you, I thought I got it. I thought I knew it. And then he comes to my home, and I was like, crap, I don't have it. And, I research this stuff all the time. I read it. I work at Texas Children's Public Health. I mean, literally, I've got the head of psychiatry and the head of psychology cell phone numbers in my programmed into my phone. I'm in constant meetings with them. I've got access to the best professionals in Houston. And y'all, I still didn't get it. Like, I still was struggling. I still was like, we were missing things, And, my son, after we adopted him, he started going through a lot of tragedies and strong things. Really, the trauma was coming out. It was causing a lot of things in the home. And I was like, okay, we can't deal with this at home. And we started to look at an RTC to see if maybe there's somebody that can help us support him a little bit better. Because we obviously we have the best of the best. I can't say that we can get any more resources that are better for him. And every RTC denied us because his trauma was too significant. And I just want us to hear that. The people that are trained to support these kids, and people that do this work all the time, my son's trauma was too much, And so, and the thing is when we have the experts that are dealing with this, and we're trusting foster parents to deal with this all the time in their home, that there's such a huge disconnect to what is out there and what we have resource for these foster parents. And so that's kind of why part of my job and my new position at the hospital is I talk about this stuff because it's real, it's really hard work, and I'm pretty authentic and tell you I don't always have it figured out. So we're just going to kind of go through what research says and just kind of really kind of summarize it up. I'm going to give you lots of experiences from my home. You'll probably know too much about me by the end of this. So I first want to talk about adverse childhood experiences. Who here has ever heard the phrase adverse childhood experiences? You guys? Okay. Now, adverse childhood experiences is, there was a physician, Dr. Folletti, back in the 90s, and he worked in a weight loss clinic. And he started to see a trend that his patients were pretty commonly victims of early sexual abuse. And what he started to see is the patients, they would start doing really well, they would lose the weight, they would start feeling confident, they would start feeling attractive, and then all of a sudden, there were several patients in a row that then gained back the weight so fast that he's like, it's not even humanly possible to put that much weight on that quickly. And so what he started to realize as he talks to these women and stuff is that they were now slender and they were starting to gain more attention by males, and that was uncomfortable to them. And that brought their trauma back up. And it was so uncomfortable that then they sabotaged everything that they had already done. And so he started to wonder, like, what kind of experiences that people have in individual, does it change their health outcomes as an adult? So this is where we got the ACE study. And at the time they looked at specific things. They looked at abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. And these were things that they wanted people to experience, or that they were sent on a survey, asked these people if they've experienced these early on in life, and then looked at their health outcomes as an adult. And they had all the health records of these individuals because they were all part of the Kaiser Permanente HMO plan. Now, this was not a diverse group. This is a group of like 72% of them had attended college, 77% were white, and the majority of them were over 50. Now, in this non-diverse group, they found ACEs were really common. That most people had these adverse childhood experiences, and up to like 60% of people had at least one adverse childhood experience. But then there was people that had more. They were complex on top of each other. And then what they started to see is there was actual correlation between how many adverse childhood experiences they experienced as a child to how many they experienced, or health outcomes as an adult. So if they looked at depression, if you are somebody with no adverse childhood experiences, you have a 10 to 15% chance of experiencing depression as an adult. But if you have 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, that goes up to 60% chance of experiencing depression as an adult. And this wasn't just depression, this was suicide attempts. We saw this increase in heart disease, liver disease, obesity. You are more likely to become a victim of intimate partner violence. You are more likely to have cancer. So you're like, how do you get to adverse childhood experiences to more likelihood to get cancer as an adult? That's like, maybe we can talk about suicide attempts and we can maybe see that correlation, but how did we get to cancer? Now that was groundbreaking. You would have thought that would have changed the hospital system all over the place. And I'll tell you what, 23 years later, majority of our physicians don't even know about adverse childhood experiences, right? But there has been extensive research gone on that has happened over the past 24 years of this. And what we found is that these experiences, these adverse childhood experiences in children, we can quickly see changes in them and significant outcomes even as they're children. These children are more likely to have increased rates of learning disabilities. They are more likely to repeat grades. They have a decreased feeling of self-worth and self-efficacy. They show challenges in connecting with other people. They're 5 times more likely to experience internalizing behaviors, 3.5 times more likely to have externalizing behaviors like aggression, significant higher mental health diagnosis, and we start to see differences within, similarities within culture backgrounds. This is what we know. This is huge. So ultimately, we have so many consequences to childhood trauma. We see it in their physical health, where they have lower health outcomes. We see them in that emotional dysregulation that happens and managing their emotions. We see that in relationships where they can't connect with people, they can't interact. Mental health, we see problems with anxiety and depression, postpartum suicidality. We see it behavior, y'all have seen it, right? The behavior outcomes that we see in a lot of these children. We see changes in their brain development that if we actually go look at a child who's had trauma as a child compared to a child who hasn't, we can actually see changes in their brain through an MRI scan. There's different factors within that brain, and we see different levels of cognition. And so now what we have after all these 24 years of research around adverse childhood experiences, we have this ACE pyramid. Now, just recently in the past many years where they've started to look at historical trauma, that we can actually see like a grandfather that experienced trauma, we will see that impact generations, 2 generations below, where we can see changes in those, in the biology and the epigenetics of that individual. But if we start with adverse childhood experiences, we do know that we have a disrupted neurodevelopment. Their brain changes. They don't, there's a break in learning and how their brain develops. From there, we see a social and emotional and cognitive impairments. From there, we start to see adaptation of health risk behaviors, disease and disabilities. And for somebody who has several adverse childhood experiences, they typically die 20 years before their peers that have no adverse childhood experiences. That's crazy that we start to see people dying so much faster. So what is trauma? Now, trauma comes in many different ways. There is no really consistent definition. There's no consistent group. There's no certain certification that you can say, yes, I'm trauma-informed, anything like that, okay? But what trauma is it's just a reaction to experiences, right? It comes in complex trauma where people have lots of different experiences of trauma, and I would say that is every child in the foster care system, because there was trauma that got them into the foster care system. And I think the foster care system is the most traumatic system ever, right? It's just over and over trauma. But we see it with war. We see if they're a witness to violence. We see racism, natural disasters. There's historical trauma, grief, bullying, abuse, mental illnesses within families. So all of these experiences really can be traumatic, or they can't. Like, it just depends on the individuals. And many years ago, all the experts in the field of trauma, they all came together in one big meeting, in person at the time, because that was allowed, right? I'm sure wine and dine in some place. And they all decided, like, we need to come up with a definition of trauma. And the reality is, they came up with the 3 E's, and that's it. Events, experience, and effects. And they don't really have a definition because there's no one experience that can define what trauma is. It's really about the effects. It can be an actual or extreme threat, all right? It's a single or ongoing experience. We know that it's the experience, it's how that child perceives that experience. I would imagine if you guys have siblings, my sister and I were talking on the phone on the way up here, right? And we're talking, and we take the same experience that we have as children, and her and I have totally 2 different perceptions of that experience. I'm like, one moment, I'm like, I thrived through it, and I was like, oh no, this is great, this is why I do this. And she's like, oh my God, I was miserable through that experience, and this is why I do this in my life. Because we have such different perceptions of that, all right? And that's the same thing for kids during traumatic experiences. They all have different perspectives. And the effects. Because once you've gone through a traumatic experience, there is long-lasting, sometimes delayed, and sometimes immediate responses to that event. So we need to kind of have all 3, and it's really how the child perceives that experience. So when we have a childhood trauma, it impacts our body in 3 ways. One is epigenetics, one is brain development, and one is the immune system. So all 3 areas of our body are impacted. Our brain system, we're going to kind of focus on first. And to recognize that our stress response comes in two different ways. Our first is our sympathetic nervous system, which we're going to get to in a second. The other is our parasympathetic nervous system. Now, our parasympathetic nervous system starts with our what we call the vagal nerve. And it's a nerve in our body that goes all through our head, all right, goes all the way down our spine, and as you can see in the picture, goes out to all our organs. This is the longest nerve in our body, and it manages all our emotional responses. Our sympathetic nervous system works like this. I'm walking in the woods, and I see a bear. All of a sudden, my sympathetic nervous system is going to be activated. I'm going to see a threat. That bear is going to scare me, and I have to decide if I'm going to fight or flight, right? Fight, yeah. All right, so if I choose in that moment to fight that bear, all right, my sympathetic nervous system is going to be activated. My hypothalamus is going to send a message to my pituitary gland, it's going to send a message to my adrenal gland, and my body is going to be flooded with cortisol. And this cortisol is going to do amazing things. It's going to give me superhuman strength. I'm going to be able to easily beat off this bear, right? If somehow I get slightly injured, all right, remember that sympathetic cortisol is going all the way down my vagal nerve, out to my organs, and that little bit of cortisol is just going to help heal me till I can get to the hospital to heal like my ruptured spleen or something, right? But all is good. Because this is supposed to be a fast-acting system, okay? It's going to flood me with energy and hormones that are going to help me get through that experience. If I just flee, it's going to help me run through that woods and get through it with precision, right? Well, this is all great, okay? Remember, again, fast-acting system. This helps us in these moments. You hear those stories of women those people who have a car or something heavy is dropped on their kids, and the women's picked up this super huge thing somehow because of that response. Well, this is all great until we realize the bear is actually in our home. All right? Oops, sorry. And when that bear is in our home, this system is activated over and over and over and over again. And so what's supposed to be a fast-acting system actually becomes a permanent response into these individuals' bodies. So you kind of look at it like this. I look at it as a ladder. And every time we have an experience, our experiences, we go up that ladder. Now the bottom of that ladder is back to our brainstem. So if you guys kind of take your fist right here like this, and there's your brain right up here. Down here is the bottom of that ladder. You're going through there. That bottom part of your brain we call the dorsal vagal. All right? That is really just brainstem functioning. All right? The only information I am taking in on that thing is through sensory pieces. All right? And, oh, oh, there we go. This is where our first sense of threat is. All right? This is when we become dissociated, we become spacey, we tend to shut down if we don't get past this. Now, experience in my home one time is my husband said something to my son, and my son, he'd only been in our house a couple months. My son reacted to my husband like he had just ripped off the head of his teddy bear or something like that. Like it was a huge overreaction. And my husband was like, I just said something to him. What did I do? Why did he react like that? And it's taken my husband a little while, but he finally got there to realize that it could have been the shadow of the light that was there. It could have been a single word. It could have been a smell that kind of came through my son's nose at the time. And my son was no longer in that moment with my husband saying what he was saying. He was a little boy in an abusive situation and he freaked out. All right, because his brain didn't allow him to go anywhere past this ladder. He just freaked out. And this is what we happen a lot of times in these homes is all of a sudden these kids react and they think, what did I do? Well, you didn't do anything. You're just paying the sins of everybody else's sins, right? if we're lucky enough to get past that dorsal vagal, we go into our sympathetic nervous system, and that is like right here. So again, in the brain, right there in the middle of our brain, right? This is where our amygdala is, and then amygdala tells us whether we need to fight or flee, all right? It's always ready to act. And I would gather to say this is the majority of the kids in the foster care system, is they're always ready to act. Because they don't know when they're gonna get moved, they don't know what somebody's gonna say, they don't know what the next day is, they're always ready to act. And part of the thing is we actually see these kids' amygdala is actually larger and stronger because they are always ready to act, right? And this is where they are stuck in. Now, if we are able to go up further, what we do is we see our ventral vaga where the people are calm. This is where hopefully everyone in this room is. This is where we want everybody in the classrooms to be, and this is what we want people in our homes to be. Because this is when they're able to connect. This is when they're able to use their good thinking skills and process, all right? Anywhere below that, they're just reacting, and they don't even know what they're reacting to. If you look at it with this picture, I think this really represented. So if you're in that dorsal vagal, the part of your brain that is the red, okay? That is the only part of your brain that is activated at that part. It is in that red circle right there. And for all of you guys who have the black and white copies and can't see it, it's a little red, a little red, all right? If you're in that sympathetic nervous system, you're in the yellow. Guys, notice the part of your body that's not activated here. That part of that brain, that frontal cortex that helps you to think, that's not even activated yet in that fight or flight response. And I would say my son has been in my home for 2.5 years. I think he's finally able to think. I think he's finally able to be in that green circle. But it has taken me, I think it took us 2 years in my home before that child even thought, had a coherent thought, all right? Sometimes I think his thoughts aren't really coherent now, but that's a whole other story, all right? But again, that's what we're looking at. Now, in the yellow circle, we don't process language in that yellow circle, in that mid-circle. So think about all these kids who've experienced trauma at a young age. They're doing it at a time when they don't have language. So one of the things that we were suggested as our son was struggling is you have to label his trauma. I'm going to be honest with you, that's a really hard thing to expect a foster parent who went into the system not knowing that I was going to have to be a therapist. Well, I've learned some new skills, right? But I'm not a trained therapist, yet I'm having to tell him, your dad tried to kill you. That's why you're in the system. That's not your fault. It's the fault of your dad for doing that. I have to say, when he says things, I have to pull out one of his foster parents' names, and I have to say, I didn't hurt you. I am not this person, so I can get him to think. And I'm having to be put in a position, right, that I'm technically not trained to do. And my husband is 100% not trained to do. All right? But this is what we're expecting out of foster parents. This is what we're expecting out of you guys, because you guys have the connection and the relationship with these kids. Now, the thing that they don't talk a lot about is the adverse childhood experience, is that it all starts with the attachment cycle. All right? And the reason those experiences are so important, it's because it starts at the beginning, when they're starting to develop relationships, right? So when you bring a brand new baby home from the hospital, right, that baby cries, that baby expresses a need. And when that baby does it, all those stress hormones, all right, start to flood that baby. And when we pick up that baby and we say, oh, sweet baby, it's okay, and we talk to the baby, we rock the baby, we soothe them, we move them, we move their legs to get the gas out of their stomach, we feed them, we change their diaper, we get them all nice and cozy, and we put them back to bed. And then the baby starts to get uncomfortable again, that baby cries, and we go back over there and we do this cycle over and over and over again. That baby learns connection. That baby learns trust. That baby learns that if I have a need, that need will be met. All right? I know there's a lot of conversations, and my mom yells at me all the time, Diane, you could spoil babies. And I'm like, no, you can create bad habits, but you can't spoil a baby. All right? All right? And that's what this cycle is. But think about those things. These kids that express a need, they start to cry. And those stress hormones start coming in, that cortisol starts coming in their body. But there is no need that's met. And there is no counteractiveness to that where those calming hormones are pulling those stress hormones away and calming that baby. And so what we end up having is a child that's overreactive on one side and underreactive in the other, where their body is flooded with these cortisol and all those stress hormones. They don't have those calming reflexes in their body because they never learned them. And what we quickly start to see for kids that don't have that attachment process is we see by age 2 or 3, we start to see behavioral dysregulation. See that in some of your younger kids? You see by 4 to 6, they're already diagnosed probably with ADHD. 8 to 10, we start to see depression, anxiety, and by 12, there's complete emotional and behavioral dysregulation. Okay, I want you guys to see this video. I don't know if you guys do. Oh, wait. Okay, well, I'll just explain it, especially since you guys can't see it over there. But this is called the still face experiment. If you guys ever want, it's a great video to watch. But basically they have this mom come into a room face to face with their baby. And that mom's like, hello baby, and says all the wonderful, wonderful things. And that baby is excited. That baby points to something and the mom's like, looks over where that baby points and is super excited. There's just this great interaction that goes back and forth. Well, then they ask the mom to turn away and then come back and go still face. And it's pretty amazing how quickly this baby becomes dysregulated. It takes less than a minute, and that baby starts to fuss. That baby points over there and the mom doesn't respond and the baby looks confused. The baby starts to arch their back, all right? And this is an experiment that's done over time. You know, obviously we're researchers, so we only do it for like a minute and a half, and then the mom comes back to reality and, you know, and all no harm, no foul, right? But this is what we see for kids, these moms who maybe experienced postpartum depression. This is a mom who maybe is in an intimate partner violence and hasn't connected with that baby because she's so scared, right? They don't have those same interactions and reactions to their baby. And so as a baby goes up, when we have a good attachment process, that baby starts to see like, wow, somebody perceived my actions, so I am understood. That somebody's engaging with me, that must mean I'm important. Somebody sees me as smart, that must mean I am smart. And somebody sees me as enjoyable, and I must be enjoyable. But the opposite is just as true. That baby comes out and says, nobody perceived my actions, and so therefore I'm not understood. Nobody perceived me as engaging, that means I am not important. Nobody sees me as smart, so I must not be smart, and I must not be enjoyable. All right? And that starts our cycle of these adverse childhood experiences and that stress response system. If there is anything I can leave you guys with today, the most important thing of anything we can do, it is that we have to connect. It is more important than correction. connection versus correction is so much more important. And think about it, as a baby grows up, right? That baby starts to get into things and we start to lose our connection with that child and we start to correct them. That teenager comes up, we definitely lose the connection and we start to focus a lot on that correction. But for our children in the foster care system, above anything else, we need to connect with them. One thing I learned very quickly, probably before I even came our home, there is not a single thing I can do to my son that hasn't been done 10 times worse to him. I can't give him a single punishment that I feel comfortable with that is gonna be like, so what? You took away my video games for what, 3 days or a month, whatever? I've had it gone for a year and a half, you know, like, or I've never had one before, so what's another year? You're just like everybody else, right? And he loves to bait us, right? You're gonna punish me, aren't you? You're gonna punish me. No. Because remember, at the bottom of his brainstem thinks that everybody is out to get him and everybody is there to punish him and nobody is there to listen to him. And so, gosh, we're messing with his brain a little bit because what we're trying to say to him, I'm not punishing you. I'm just here to connect. I'm just here to love you and I'm here to be with you. What you did was stupid. You know, we can all agree with that. All right? But I'm just here to be your mom. That's my only job. To walk a path with you that I'm really scared of right now in the moment. All right? But I'm here to walk it with you. Because that connection is so important for these kids. A lot of the things that connect, make a difference in stress response, all right, is that, you know, a little bit of stress is always good, right? If you start a new day, a school day, you go off to the school, you realize, oh wow, I have these kids in my class, my teacher was really nice, oh yeah, this is gonna be okay. And you pass the first assignment, whatever, and so school is great, that positive stress is great. I left that first day feeling more positive about myself. I would say everybody in this room and every child in America, and the world really, this past year, we've all been going through tolerable stress. There's nothing normal for any of us. Our families, the political divide is ugly, and so families are breaking up over this, right? And again, we're separated, we're not connected with people because of the pandemic. And so what has happened is we're all suffering through toxic stress. But if we have supportive relationships, then that stress can become tolerable. All right? We've been doing a research study in our at work, and I've interviewed over 100 people on what it is to help kids with the foster care system, and they said it just takes one. That's the #1 response I get. It just takes one. One person to make that connection that is there for the long term. One person. You guys are all that person. All right? You help make that toxic stress tolerable.